Yeah, this had been a goal my entire life. Try to do something meaningful for the future of humanity. Death is inevitable, and we've talked about life being everlasting in religious settings, but never in IRL. And then I needed to develop the philosophical structure that supports what that means. Specifically, what does that mean when you're on the eve of creating superintelligence? If people want to call Don't Die a cult, like, yes, we are. And our evil design is to get you to go to bed on time and eat well.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of First Principles. We're today here with Bryan Johnson, the man who is trying to live forever. We're going to talk a lot about a bunch of different things in this conversation, both the science of what he's actually doing with Blueprint, this protocol that he's put together, but then also his philosophy towards life and basically where he thinks humanity is headed and why he's doing this in the first place. So, Bryan, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I think that maybe that's an easy place to start. Well, not easy, but it's a fun place to start, is about kind of like the broader thing that led you here. I mean, I think it's interesting that, you have this principle or you have this idea of Zeroth principles thinking, and yet this is a First Principles podcast. So maybe let's try to just, address the elephant in the room right off the bat.
Wait, I guess there were a few beats. After selling Braintree Venmo, this had been a goal my entire life. Try to do something meaningful for the future of humanity. And that's such a challenging question. If you read history and you learn about various people in various places, sometimes discoveries or behaviors were accidental, and sometimes they were thought through carefully. And if you try to actually pose a question, like right now, like if you were trying to influence the future of the human race, what do you do? And so I did two things to try to sort that out in my mind. One is I gathered all of my smartest friends, and I did 12 dinners around the country, and I would pose the thought experiment to them. I'd say, now let's imagine we're in 2050. What did we do in 2016 that allowed this world to be remarkable? Then I listened intently to everyone's ideas. And basically you could imagine like whatever the zeitgeist was in 2016. I wrote down all those ideas and I drew a box around the ideas. And then I challenged myself that I couldn't do anything inside that box, because inside that box was basically a collection of first principle thinking. Right? It was the things that people were identifying were the next step in the iteration of various technologies. And so I challenged myself to zero. But then when I started looking outside the box, I realized that it was a very challenging thing to do. And so I confronted this, when my mind was searching for in the unknown space, I was struggling to think coherently. Like, how do you construct thoughts in zero space? And so one night I went to bed and feeling deeply the limitations of my own intelligence, I thought I need to find a framework that allows me to punch through. And that night I had a dream about Zeroth principle thinking. And it just the idea just dropped in my mind. I jumped up and I wrote it all down. I thought, I can't forget this. But yeah, it was one of the most exciting moments of my entire life, where I felt like it gave me a new appendage where I could maybe feel more, see more, intuit more. And so I've been working on this concept of Zeroth principle thinking and how I think going forward we may need to transition from first to maybe a higher ratio of zero in our thought patterns.
Totally. And the basic idea being that, first principles is great about working in a system, right? You can get down to the nitty gritty, the bare fundamentals of the system you're in. But Zeroth principle thinking is that throw the system away. What is the new system we need to be doing? Totally disregard all that first principles stuff, and where should we be going?
Exactly. Examples, germ theory. So in 1870, you're trying to identify what it is that is causing people to die, especially around maybe births and surgeries and other things. Then this idea that there are microscopic objects that the eyes can't see would be insane to contemplate in the 1870s. And most people rejected the idea that there were these invisible things called germs. And so that's an example. Special theory of relativity is also, you can't take Newtonian physics and first principle think your way into the next iteration of physics. Because these things, they don't just change the graph. They change the XY axes. Like they just remap the intellectual space.
Totally. Have you ever heard of the book After Virtue by Alistair McIntyre?
No. Oh, actually, I have heard of it. I haven't read it, though.
It's a really good book. I actually found it back when I was like a high school debater because I was like looking at it for arguments or something. But there's a really good thought experiment in it that's super Zeroth principle-y. There are two guys that are sitting around a campfire. It's like prehistoric times. One guy turns to the other and says, like, have you ever heard of this thing called like the wheel? Have you ever thought of this thing? And the guy's like, no, what are you talking about? And so the first guy goes, well, it's like this circle, and it can like rule things, and like it has this thing, but it hasn't been invented yet. And the other guy turns to him, he's like, I think you just invented it. Like the process of describing this new thing is the act of invention. And so his argument is, if you can describe something, if you actually have words for it, then you've already done the act of invention. So it's like sort of what you're trying to do is do that, like truly invent in a way that is, goes beyond the words that we have today. I think it's pretty cool.
Exactly.
Totally. Heck yeah. So I'm curious. So that was the thought experiment. That was the theoretical framework that you were operating within. Were there a lot of ideas that came to you within Zeroth principle thinking, and you had to sort of whittle it down to don't die, or did it kind of just start and that was the first one that popped up?
Yeah. Once Zeroth principle thinking became a framework I could play with, then I was set off on the task of how could you find a Zeroth principle endeavor, and then that was basically don't die. So the death is inevitable, and we've talked about life being everlasting in religious settings, but never in IRL. And so we've kind of jumped from, we made that leap. And so don't die in IRL is a different thought process. And then I needed to develop the philosophical structure that supports what that means. And specifically, what does that mean when you're on the eve of creating superintelligence? And so I was trying to stitch together how to understand reality in this moment from the vantage point of the wisdom of the 25th century. So that's like a thought experiment where you're in the 15th century and you're trying to deduce reality in some coherent fashion with the wisdom of the 21st century observing your behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is definitely like one of those thoughts of like, that is beyond the current thing. It is definitely not the current thing, or it wasn't at the time of, we sort of had like measured self, and we had sort of longevity stuff, and there were some, like whatever, the Peter Attias of the world, the Tim Ferriss of the world, we had those kind of folks that had been talking about longevity for sure, but definitely not with the frame of don't die, and definitely not to the kind of same extent of the experimentation that you've been doing. So, I mean, how did you see yourself as sort of, either working with and like on top of some of the other research that people have been doing versus kind of just creating your own thing from zero?
Yeah, it's definitely a yes and situation. I'm a yes and kind of person with friends and trolls and everyone else. I've been doing these dinners at my house. Actually, Christian, it'd be great to have you attend one. But I'll just quickly walk you through like what I do to arrive at this don't die thing. So there's 5 turns in the conversation. It takes us about 2.5 hours. And so I open with the thought experiment of, if you had access to an algorithm. Actually, let me just do it with you.
Sure. Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, Christian, if you had access to an algorithm that could give you the best physical, mental, and spiritual health of your life, in exchange for that, you did what the algorithm said. You went to bed when it said, you ate what it said, you exercised in the ways that it suggested. Would you say yes or would you say no?
Without knowing more, I don't know. I'd be afraid of what else I would give up. Like, are there experiences that I don't get to have anymore? Like, am I deciding to like forego pleasure to have this thing? Like, if all else equal, 100% obviously yes. But I would wonder about the other stuff.
So you basically want to think with first principles and know more.
Kind of, yeah. That's my brand, man. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, cool. So it's like a no, but a cautious maybe.
Yeah, it's a cautious maybe no.
Okay. Now let's imagine that the 25th century is observing our conversation, and they see me pose this question to you, and they're simply observing what are the characteristics of intelligence and morals and ethics and norms and assumptions of a Homo sapien that lives in the early 21st century. What would they say?
I actually think about this all the time, and I would love to get your answer to it too, of like, what will future generations basically like judge us for?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's so many things. Like, they're going to judge us for like eating animals that were birthed naturally, for sure, 100%. They're going to, because they're going to have, you know, the ability to create matter like however they want, basically. They're going to judge us for, like, I don't know, treating homes as assets. Like, there's a big long list of these things, but I think there are plenty of things they're going to judge us for, and I'm sure there are things that we haven't discovered that related to health and wellness that they're going to judge us for too.
And so when they observe your answer, where they hear you say no because I want to learn more, and like I see a trade-off space of sensorial pleasure, and you know, and like you. So how would they assess your intelligence? Like what are you revealing with your answer that they're going to observe?
Maybe this is just too easy because I think I know where you're headed with it, is that my brain's in control, that I'm like thinking through it, and that I myself have this sort of like limited understanding of what will be best for my life, but that I'm sticking to that even though I think it is true.
So yeah, the first turn of the thought experiment is meant to provoke our beliefs that remain invisible to us, right? So we all blurt out an answer, and it's kind of our knee-jerk reaction to a somewhat provocative question, and it kind of shows our cards. Mm-hmm. And the second turn, it shows a mirror to us, and we become much more self-reflective, just like you've done. So now you've seen this from both angles. Okay, so what could possibly happen in the future that might change our responses and how the 21st century would view our evolution? So I'm going to make 3 statements right now. So if we contemplate what's happening with AI, I think there's one specific thing that is important. One is, I think that AI is going to know more than any one of us individually and all of us collectively, and it will discover better than any one of us individually and all of us collectively. So, and whether someone says that's impossible, AI is in a nascent state, like I'm talking about from the perspective of the 25th century, right? So like, give it some time, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, whatever, over some duration of time, AI is going to be better at both knowledge acquisition and knowledge management and discovery. And so that's going to create a situation where we are transitioning as a species from one of knowing to not knowing. And our entire existence is based upon knowing many things. And so when that happens, what do we do as a species? AI is probably going to be better at being you than you are you. It's going to be better at being you than you are. And so like, we know this, like we say yes to an algorithm that helps us navigate in our car. We say yes to an algorithm to entertain us on our phones. We say yes to an algorithm, like, so on and so forth. Soon we'll have algorithms that like help us with our reasoning processes. Like we do this in text-based form now, right? But you can see it naturally that algorithms just do things better over time. And we say yes in all these incremental ways. And eventually we'll just say like, legit, this algorithm is better. Like, I'm actually more productive. I'm happier. I'm more stable. You can imagine a world where it just generally gets better. Now, I'm going to avoid dystopic outcomes for the moment, but generally speaking, that's what we see is like algorithms generally improve our lives when we say yes. So if we take those 2 principles of where we're going, then the most important question in this part of the galaxy surfaces. What do we do as the most intelligent species we know in this part of the galaxy? What do we do when we're giving birth to superintelligence? When we're not the knowing party anymore, when we're not the discovery party anymore, when it's not clear what our control is going to be on how this thing evolves, what do we do? So I have an answer. I have a proposal, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, in this moment, what do we do?
I think that the fact that it is more intelligent than us means that what we think about it might not really matter that much. Like, I think that because it is so much better at reasoning, any answer that I come up with for what it should do is going to be I actually think we might actually be seeing this in the way that we're training AI, like right now in 2024. Like, you're seeing a little bit of an asymptote. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that humans are rating the answers of the AI, and we're just like saying what we would have said. So it's sort of a paradox. It's like, AGI or whatever is this infinitely smarter thing, like better than us. And so it'd be the equivalent of me like going up to my like pet rabbit and saying like, what do you think is the best way to care for you, pet rabbit? Like, it doesn't know. It has no idea.
So this is when I went through this thought process, I arrived that we really can only say one thing with confidence, and that is don't die. Don't Die is the most played game by everybody on planet Earth every second of every day. We play it more than religion. We play it more than capitalism. We play it more than anything. Like right now, if something were to threaten your life or my life, we would stop the podcast and we would take care of not dying. As a species, it is the only thing we agree upon. And it's not that we even disagree, like don't die in 20 years. People will smoke and people will take, risks. But so it's not even that we agree on don't die in 20 years. We agree we don't want to die right now. And so if we have to really figure out what alignment means, that's the singular thing we align on as a species. And so don't die individually, don't kill each other, don't kill the planet, and align AI with don't die. And so then whatever happens after don't die, like what games we play, how we evolve, that's all a secondary consideration to securing don't die as a zeroth order operating system of this planet. And so that's what my entire endeavor was about, is I wanted to demonstrate me as the embodiment of don't die. Like, how do you actually be that? And so it's a system where you measure every single way my body dies every day. You try to find therapies to slow down that speed of aging and then compensate for aging damage. And then you measure to see how you did, and you repeat again and again and again, trying to drive the death to zero. You can't stop entropy, so you can just slow it down a certain degree and then repair. And then it's the same protocol that would apply to Earth. You take the Earth, you measure everything, billions of data points a second. You look at the science of how do you maintain a coral reef that's healthy, like a biosphere that's healthy. You implement the protocol again and again and again. And so you do that for all verticals of society. And so as a species, I guess my proposal is, we currently live in this luxurious world where we can say many things about existence, and we're quickly narrowing that aperture to being able to only say one thing, which is lock in on don't die. And then we can join hands and play games above don't die, but we can't do that until we first secure don't die as the singular operating system of our world.
I love that. I think that is really interesting too, because, and I wanted to ask you this question of like, what do you see your role as in the system? Like you just said, it's sort of the embodiment of don't die. I also hear though, there's a lot of like, you're like the chief philosopher of don't die, and that you've sort of done the thought experiments that lead you to conclude that we shouldn't die. Like there's like a lot of I think therefore I am sort of parallels of like just shed all this other stuff that we can't be certain about. What can we be certain about? Not dying. Like let's be certain about our existence first.
Yes.
So there's philosopher, there's embodiment. Like, do you see that there, like, what are the other roles that you play within don't die, and which of them do you think are the most important?
I mean, there's 5 levels of ambition that I would categorize. It's start a company, start a country, start a religion, don't die, become God.
And you're right there. You're in between country and God. Yeah.
Yeah, because in any other generation of time, you really in the past couple thousand years, you could only aspire to 1 through 3. You could never aspire to 4 or 5. It just was out of technical reach. And so now, like just in the past few years, a reasonable person could aspire to 4 and 5. And that's insane. Like it levels up ambition of the species to a never before contemplated goal. And so, yes, I think it's not just my goal. I think it's our shared goal as a species.
Got it. So if there's this shared goal as a species, which is don't die, and you're trying to bring it about, obviously, like that's, you've had the original idea, you think it's powerful, you've seen its impact on your life, you want to bring it to as many people as possible. I mean, it does. I mean, it feels a little bit religious, though, doesn't it? I mean, it in the same sense that religion is a set of shared ideals that people get behind, that change their lives, that make them do rituals, that have them believe in things that are larger than themselves. Especially with the whole kind of like, I wouldn't call it ascetic, but I would call it like you're sort of surrendering self-control, like your own self-control to a certain extent. It is fairly religious in that sense. I mean, as I know that there was a period of your life where you were more religious and then sort of you weren't. Like, do you see that parallel, or do you feel that parallel in how you're kind of interacting with don't die?
Religion is used in a pejorative term, right? So it's like if you're going to pull out the R word, you're basically going to level an insult. It's not like someone starts a company and you admire the ambition, you admire the galvanization, you admire the idea. You talk about a religion and it's like, all of a sudden everyone's apprehensive and they want to cast shame. But religions are like the most durable form of human organization ever created. And so it's a really weird cultural thing to just jump on the bandwagon and say, religion's bad. And so, the people, you've of course used the pejorative word like cult. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I want to call to our attention, to our zeitgeist, that we are presuming we're better than religion. We ourselves are, are post-religion. Everyone is religious. Everyone follows rituals. Everyone follows shared community practices. It's a really silly debate. And so, I just embrace it. If people want to call Don't Die a cult, yes, we are. And our evil design is to get you to go to bed on time and eat well. We are pernicious and we're coming after. But there's no better way to deal with it than just say yes and. But yeah, I mean, it's if you're ambitious, then you should never deride the most durable form of human change ever created.
Using Strata makes all of your identity tools stronger, connecting any app with any service that you want to use. Strata's identity orchestration platform separates the identity logic from your applications, so you can optimize existing IAM tools and manage them from a single control plane. So in short, building an identity fabric with Strata will allow you to secure non-standard legacy apps, keep your complex access policies, retire outdated identity providers, and get everything done in record time. Visit strata.io/firstprinciples and get a free pair of AirPods Pro when you share your identity priorities with the Strata team. Connect today at strata.io/firstprinciples. Let's get back to the show.
If Blueprint or Don't Die is sort of like a religion, and you are, its greatest follower, but also sort of its message bearer, do you think a lot about, to bring it back to sort of first principles, do you think about the building blocks of getting a meme into the world? What are those? And you have so many different tactics that you've used on social media, from, posting semi-nude photos to picking fights to being inspirational, all the whole gamut. Have you thought a lot about bringing a meme into the world, and how do you do that from a first principles perspective?
Yeah, it's kind of I do play with those mediums. I play with seriousness and troll and and fights, because it's like an instrument where you want to play as many notes as you can. You want your range to be, you want a big dynamic range. And if you're serious or sincere as your primary currency, you could only play so many songs. And so I'm always looking for the broadest dynamic range just for the music creation in all the different vectors. So yeah, I mean, right now I'm trying to formalize and create action behind Don't Die. So I've done it with health, right? That translates to basic things we know about. But if you take it to an adjacency like school lunch. So for example, when you smoke 2 cigarettes, it shortens your life by 30 minutes. So let's just say you can actually quantify certain behaviors and what they have for a cost of life. So let's say we're trying to quantify the cost of the school lunch we give in America to kids. So let's say it's a piece of pizza, it's chocolate milk, and it's canned vegetables. And let's just say together we assign a die score of 7 minutes. So we're feeding our kids die. Now that's helpful, because if you tell somebody about die individually, they're going to put up all these blocks but I prefer a life of stimulation. I want my alcohol and my benders with my friends. They're going to defend all their vices. They're going to defend all their behaviors. They're going to tell me that death is beautiful because it replenishes the earth, and death is wonderful because it gives life to me. They're going to have all these elegant arguments defending death and their own vices. If you frame it hey, we're feeding kids die, you can't defend that. Nobody wants kids to eat die. And so that's a good example of, okay, if you want to eliminate die from school lunch, what do you do? And that is the same process I went through, right? You have to quantify death. You have to figure out what the science is of not die. Then you have to go through the protocol again and again. So we get 0 don't die for kids. And if you get to a positive side of your extending life, even better. So you take that format and you then say, okay, now what is don't die coral reef? What is don't die international relations? What is don't die biosecurity? Take any domain in society, how do you quantify death in all its forms? And you basically say, all right, as a species, this is our game. Before, it was how to make the most amount of money, or how to get the most social media followers. We're going to play a brand new game and see who can rack up the biggest don't die score.
Very cool. I love that. Okay, so this is a perfect time to dive in more deeply into what the Don't Die kind of program is, or how you think about it, and the therapies you chose and how you chose them and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I think just to start it at the true like ground floor level, like what is death and what is aging and how do you think about those things from the first principles, like super, super basic level?
In a conversation last week at this group I was with, this gentleman's response was, I'm okay to die. Like I'm fine. Like I'm just going to go on to my next version. And it's like, my response to him is like, you can say that because you're not dead, right? It's like, can we just be honest?
Yeah.
Like every time your mind chirps with any kind of understanding about reality, you're only given that privilege because you're not dead. And so to realize, and this, it takes people time to like go through this loop. They don't understand that don't die is what gives them breath. And so that is as a basic level. And like once you take that as a starting point, then you can walk into the other pillars of the Don't Die framework. I forget what the question was.
Oh no, it's okay. No, so basically, I would love for us to take like a kind of a big step back and say like, what is death and what is aging?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So what we did that was unique is we said, when the heart stops pumping, how would you go about doing this? So like, if you're in health and wellness, and you're with a group of friends and the topic comes up, you may hear questions like, I'm doing one nostril breathing, to activate my, my parasympathetic nervous system. Or people will be like, I've got a cold plunge practice, or like I do yoga, or I do Pilates. Like everyone's got their thing, right? And so if you hang out in health or wellness, you have a near infinite number of things that people are going to do. Eastern medicine and spiritual practices and like community with different dimensions via psychedelics. Like everyone's got a jam. But what we did is we said, okay, so there's an infinite search space. How do you find the power laws? Like you have to basically say like, we can actually only do like 20 things, and we can only do those 20 things really well. So what we did as a team, I hired 30 medical professionals. We combed through all the scientific literature on health span and lifespan. And then we found the effect size of what actually worked the best. And then we ranked the biostatistical data to say, what do we actually believe? And then we rank ordered those. And we said, all right, we have the power laws. Let's start with number one. And so number one was too risky. It was a gene therapy that basically you can't turn off. So we said, okay, too risky. We can't do number one. What's number two? And then we went down the list. And so we've gone down, I think we're out to like 200 something now, but we've implemented all the power laws. And then we recorded all of this, and we shared all my data publicly. And as far as we know, I have the best biomarkers of anyone in the world. Now, this is not to say people don't have better biomarkers than me. They maybe do. We just don't know about it. So of people who are measured across the areas of cardiovascular ability and inflammation and total bone mineral density and speed of aging, etc., like this whole long list of stuff, I have the best biomarkers in the whole world. And so it demonstrates it actually works. Like we took me as a 43-year-old who had beat himself up his entire life, like bad sleep, chronically depressed, terrible diet. And we took me from a terrible place to like among the best in the world in 3 years' time. And so I wanted to show like basically the 4-minute mile for longevity. Like, so people be like, I didn't think that was possible. And now I'm not totally sold, but okay, I'm open.
But someone's done it. There's
Yes.
a guy who's done it. So
Yes.
it's possible. Is there literally an Excel spreadsheet somewhere with just like 300, 500 rows of all this research? That's so crazy. I love that. And how did you find those researchers?
It was very, very hard because, as you would expect, most people are trained in a specific discipline, in a certain religion.
Totally.
It is a religion. It's once you get in that world, it's almost impossible to change their frame. And so it's really a bunch of misfits who they're either in a system or outside of it, and they just feel uncomfortable. They don't formally enter systems, and so they're like refugees almost. And we just kind of pick them up, and
Nice.
they find a home with us where we play fast and we're robust, but we definitely don't play by anyone's rules.
Do you have your body divided among people? Are there I work at a satellite company. Like we have different responsible engineers for different parts of the satellite, like the solar arrays or the flight computer or something. So do you have the equivalent of like responsible engineers for do you have like an ear guy and a heart guy, or is that basically how it's?
Yeah, we do it on an organ by organ basis, because redefined, if I can say I'm chronologically 46, but that's not really helpful. I need to talk about my heart age. And when I speak about my heart's age, I need to speak about it from its anatomical function, or anatomical and then functional capacity. So I need to measure my heart age by like, 10, 15 measurements. And then you've got a true estimate on biological age. And that's true for every organ. And so I'm chronologically 46, but biologically, hundreds of different ages.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I love that. So that is such a rethink of what age is, obviously. Yeah. Like most people, I'm 33 because I've been alive. I was born 33 years ago in a couple months or whatever. But so can we dig into that a little bit? Like, I don't know if there are specific examples of organs that you would like highlight as interesting in the way that you're calibrating the age of it, but is it like a functional thing, or is it like are there like, I'm sure there's a lot of function, but then also deeper data of like, inflammation or something related to these different. I'm curious if a couple examples.
Cardiovascular ability through VO2 max. So it's how well your body can utilize oxygen. That is that data set's solid. Like it's an age graph. So at age 18, you peak and then you decline from there. That doesn't mean that you're highest at age 18. You can get higher over time as you build, but generally speaking, age 18 is when you peak. And so, my cardiovascular ability, my VO2 max, is 58.7, which is the top 1.5% of 18-year-olds. And then if you look at my total bone mineral density, it's important. I'm in the top 0.02% of 30-year-olds, which is age minimum for that test. And if you look at my nighttime erections, it's like, it always makes people laugh, but it's a really important marker for psychological, cardiovascular, and sexual health. I'm better than the average 18-year-old by a significant margin. Because the younger you are, the more erections you have, and then they start tapering down over time until you have none. And so if you take any one of my few dozen markers that are big ones, there's very clear age graphs on where something should be at a certain age. And so we've tried to take every single one, kidney, liver, heart, pancreas, thymus, brain, ears, like eyes, like everything, and try to bioage it and then try to reverse that age.
Is there a particular one that you feel like more people should know about that don't? Like thymus is one you've mentioned I've heard you talk about before, I think, that most people don't know what that is. Are there other ones that are, or maybe is that one that you would highlight as more people should know about?
I mean, this is why I did the penis, because I was talking about my heart. We had just done this. I think one of the coolest things we did is we reduced my thymus age by 7 years. Now, the thymus is like this gland right behind your sternum. It's responsible for your immune system. It's really important. Like you don't want an aged thymus. And so through this protocol, we reduced my thymus age by 7 years. We published it. We did 3 MRIs. We coded brand new software to the process. Like we put so much effort into it, and we shared it publicly, and like no one cared. So like we did that several times with these different organs. And so one day I was talking to my team, like, you guys, like we're doing this really cool process of like, we do rigorous biological age measurement. We looked at the science and the therapies. We measure again, like did it work? We do the scientific method. What if we did sexual health? And so I posed the question to the team, what would it take for me to have the most quantified penis in the world? What would you do? Like, what measurements do you do of penis function? And then I went and did all of them. I did all the penis measurements. And then we said, okay, so now we have a baseline on this. What are the therapies that have clinical evidence as efficacious? And then we give a score. We said, okay, so like this kind of all collapses into like, what are your nighttime boners? And like no one knew it. No one knew nighttime boners were relevant. No one knew it was a marker of biological age. No one knew, but it showed the process of measurement, intervention, protocol. So like that was really helpful because it really got the point across that you can actually approach each function, each biological organ of the body, and approach it with scientific rigor.
That's so I think there's 2 examples that you talked about that I think are interesting to kind of compare against each other. VO2 max, most people I think I've heard about it. You see the athletes with the mask and they're on the treadmill, and it's like people know that one, and I'm sure there's tons of data for it. Nighttime erections, I'm sure, I don't know, but I would assume that there's not a lot of data already, and probably the comparison that you had to do to like was probably harder. Like, could you find other studies, like existing studies that you could compare yourself to, or was it curious to kind of compare those? Because it's like super, super extremely studied, everybody knows about, less studied, I'm sure. You guys had to really dig probably to go find stuff, but you ultimately did find studies.
One study that had done nighttime erections. And then we found a company out of the UK, Atom Health. They had built a device that does erection measurements. It's a little cube. It sits at the base of the penis, and you put it on before you go to bed. You just forget about it. Like you put it on, you think it's going to be annoying. It's actually just fine.
It seems distracting.
Yeah, exactly. But you're fine, just fine. And then it measures the number of nighttime tumescence at the boner. And so it measures the quality. So it's looking at engorgement of the penis, and it happens during REM sleep. And so like I had so many of my friends, when I posted this, they messaged me with great concern. And they're like, I'm getting no boners. Like I'm never erect. And most of the time, their sleep quality was atrocious. So when your sleep quality goes down, boners just evaporate. And so that's why it's a good evidence. Like if you are not convinced that sleep is really important, just look at all the critical functions that just go away immediately, including. So it's a really good learning experience of people creating these intuitions that, going to bed on time really matters. And, your last meal of the day matters a lot because it determines how you sleep. And like just to do all this domino effect of like, okay, I can see how these pieces fit together, that a person's vitality really is in this chain reaction of events. So it helps people understand that you go back into this primary thing of like, does it make sense to become a martyr for, if you're, then like you're basically paying with like double or triple time life points by doing this.
This is like a small, like maybe personal question. Do you dream a lot?
My memory or my creativity is most robust in my dreams. I have more ideas in my sleep than I do when I'm awake. But the quality of my ideas are better in my sleep than I'm awake.
That's when the other dimension is reaching out to you to tell you your Zeroth principle ideas.
Yeah.
I'm curious, can we talk a little bit about the PAC, pace of aging calculated tests? I'm curious to hear about those. So there's, I don't know if I'm saying it right, Dunedin, that one. That's the main one, right, for DNA methylation, that's how they measure it? You just mind talking a little bit about that?
When we first started, so there's these new clocks they use. They look at DNA methylation patterns, like chemical signatures in the body, and these chemical signatures have information encoded that are patterns about your age, and so they change with age. And so when the clocks first came out a couple of years ago, when I first started Blueprint, we were like, hey, cool, clocks. But the clocks are trained with like each clock is trained for a certain objective. So the clocks are different. So when you hear people complain of like, I did this clock and it said I was this age, and this clock said it's that age, is because the clocks are trained differently. So it's not like the clocks are bad. It just means they're trained for different objectives. And so when we said, okay, we're just going to test all clocks. So we tested me with 6 clocks. And then I think we waited 6 months or 8 months, and we tested me on 8 clocks again. And I had reversed my epigenetic age by 5.1 years. And that was like one of the first viral hits we had. We're just playing around. Like, we're just like trying to figure out what is a clock and what do they say and like how do we compare them. But they kind of like, we were not really thinking I'd reverse my age by 5.1 years. We're like, hey, the clock shows something. But then over the years, we've really focused on this true diagnostic denuded pace. So it's based upon one of the most robust longitudinal studies out of New Zealand. I think it's one of the longest running ever. And it's a 3rd gen clock now. And initially we would say it's a silver standard marker because like blood, like, cholesterol and triglycerides, like those things are gold standard in terms of predicting all-cause mortality. But these we'd say are silver standard because they haven't yet crossed that threshold of predictability for all-cause mortality. It's getting very close now where they can predict this. So it's now getting the respect of more and more people of like, okay, this was like an emergent thing. We were skeptical of this. Now we're taking it much more seriously because it's now predicting the phenotypic markers much more accurately. So I started with so if you score a 1 on the test, if I'm 46, I score a 1, that means I'm aging at a normal rate of a 46-year-old. If I'm aging at 1.01 or more, I'm faster than normal, and 0.99 or less, I'm aging slower than. And so we've worked my speed of aging down to 0.64, which is my most recent measurement. It's lower than 99+% of 20-year-olds. So it's one of the lowest scores in the world for men. And we're very proud of this because we've worked so hard to systematically do it. But like a rough summary of it is for every 12 months that pass, I age for 7 months and I get 5 months for free.
So I know that I don't know very much about this. I know that at the end of your DNA, there's like these things that are repeating maybe, and I don't know what they do. Maybe somebody else does. But they have something to do with aging. Is that something that you measure as well? And is that like another marker of aging that you care about?
Yeah, we measure it We have measured it for years. It's something we routinely do. We have been unsuccessful to change my telomere length with almost everything. Like there have been small changes, but nothing really important. But telomeres, I think, is the number one performing. It was a combination of telomere. I think, if I remember right, it was a study of telomeres, clotho, and follistatin gene therapy. And so we haven't done telomerase gene therapy yet because it's not yet safe. Like you can do it, but once you do it, you can't turn it off. And so there's only one person who's done it, and like it's just a risk. Like if something goes wrong, like cancer, you can't turn it off. And so I did do my first gene therapy in October. So in the world of gene therapies, you need a delivery vehicle to get the gene therapy in the body. And what most people use is called an AAV. And so that's the one that can't be turned off. And it has other complications with antibodies. I used a plasmid. And so it's a friendly vehicle. It delivers a protein inside the nucleus, and then it just produces more of a protein. Like, for example, what I did is follistatin. So this gene therapy is producing higher levels of follistatin that I would otherwise have in my body. And this has been typically seen with bodybuilders where you've seen like the big cows or dogs that are just very large and muscled out. Have you seen those?
Yeah. They're terrifying.
And so that's what follistatin has been associated with. But we've been looking at it for its rejuvenation effects across whole bodies. We've been looking at my muscle mass and my bone mineral density and a whole bunch of markers. Like we're trying to see like what whole body effect, because as the most measured person in history, we get this really interesting view of everything that goes on when we do these therapies. And so the thing that the gene therapy did, which was interesting, is it lowered my speed of aging to this 0.64. Before it was hovering like at 0.69, 0.7. And this is the only one we did that could be responsible for it. So in that regard, it's efficacious. We've been very happy with it.
So most of my listeners will know this is mostly a deep tech, hardware-y kind of podcast where we talk to a lot of folks that have built, these devices or have built, new machines. You've actually done this. You helped with Kernel, which was I think an FNIRS project. Is that right? Do you mind telling us about what that was and how it's going?
Yeah, so after selling Braintree Venmo, it was this question of what to do. And so in that time duration I spoke to you about of like trying to figure out, I did two things to kind of just fill the time. One is I started a venture fund. So I invested $100 million into deep tech. So I invested in synthetic biology, genomics, computational therapeutics. So like, for example, I was first money behind Ginkgo Bioworks, which is now the world leader in synthetic biology. And so I did that. It was cool because I got to work in the trenches with scientist entrepreneurs. Like, how do you commercialize deep tech? And then the second thing I did is I built Kernel. And so my contemplation was, we are currently the intelligence building AI. And it may be interesting if we built our intelligence alongside of AI. And currently, integrating the brain and AI is very hard. Like, we have all these things in between us. We have fingers, we have to type, and like visual systems. So I wanted to build the world's first mass market brain interface that could make reading the brain output easy to integrate with AI. And so we started with the team, and we had this question that we were going to look at it from a first principles perspective. Like, how can you figure out what is happening inside the brain? So we spent 2 years looking at every possible way: electrical, magnetic, acoustic, and electrical. And then we mapped out each path, and we said, okay, what can the technology do? What are the challenges for commercialization? We spun up systems internally. We acquired data. We pressure tested the various paths. But it was such a cool thing. We were just this group of people at the edge of physics and science trying to figure out these new modalities. And so we ended up deciding on building a time domain functional near infrared spectroscopy system. And so it's where, basically, think of it like wearable fMRI. You put a bike helmet on your head, and you've got images of the brain in minutes. And it's low cost, versus being in a big claustrophobic system. So we were successful. We built an ASIC. That took like 4 years to build out.
Wow. Cool.
I personally invested $64 million in the company. So I kept it alive through the financial crisis. I kept it alive through COVID. It was just like this, like, deep tech is hard enough, but then to ride through multiple crises. So that was brutal. But yes, the tech is built. It's working. We're now in clinical studies for mild cognitive impairment and depression. So I'm very proud that we actually built something that had never been built before. it works. We just showed gold standard equivalent with fMRI. So we succeeded. Like, we built a mass market brain interface. So I'm very proud of it. It was a really fun endeavor to do. And so I hope that we succeed at these things and we can go off to much bigger things of getting these in the hands of like millions or billions of people.
Yeah, those things that the more I've learned about the near infrared spectroscopy stuff is so cool. It's like somewhere between like brain radar, where you're like kind of pinging these like infrared systems off, but then also it's kind of like this little well, I don't know what you call them, like the little blood finger clip things.
Exactly,
it's
right.
Like it's the same idea. It's the same idea, but it's just looking into your brain and seeing what's happening. I think it's
exactly
so cool.
Right.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. I mean, any kind of final thoughts to people other than don't die? How should they not die? Where would you send them?
Yeah, I would say if anyone listening is interested in building Don't Die with me, I'm putting together a group of people, and we're going to get together and we're going to talk about the various verticals. Like, bring your idea, bring your specialty, and then we'll work through the thought process of like, how do you actually so take an abstract concept like international relations. How do you think about nation states working on Don't Die? What does that even mean? So we're going to try to break apart complicated topics into actionable things. And yeah, I'm really trying to build it out, number one. And then number two, yeah, I would just encourage people that to really think about, like, we really may be at, on the eve of the most spectacular existence in this part of the galaxy. And I know our lives are full and the day is demanding and like there's all kinds of things that demand our attention. But really, if we can get our, if we can get our shit together as a species and, realize the preciousness of this moment, it may be spectacular, far beyond our imagination. So I hope that we can band together and do this. I think it'd just be an amazing journey to go on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is great.
Thanks.